We begin this news hour in the U.S. state of California, where voters have begun casting their ballots in an historic recall election for Governor Gavin Newsom. Only once before has a governor faced removal from office in the Golden State, and it's caused so much concern that President Biden has visited California to show his support. Governor Newsom, a first-term Democrat, has come under fire from Republicans for his handling of the COVID crisis and his approach to crime, homelessness, and immigration. The vote is being watched avidly ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, when control of Congress and more than half of governorships are decided. Larry Elder, a conservative talk radio host, is the Republican frontrunner, and he's blaming Mr. Newsom for the high number of forest fires in the state, citing poor forest management rather than climate change.
We still have people that are in complete denial, that don't believe climate change is real. People that still call it a hoax. Larry Elder, who calls it a myth. Larry Elder, who says his solution to the climate issue is more offshore oil drilling off the coast of Long Beach.
The eyes of the nation, this is not hyperbole, the eyes of the nation are on California. Because the decision you're about to make isn't just going to have a huge impact on California. It's going to reverberate around the nation, and quite frankly, not a joke, around the world. All of you know that last year I got to run against the real Donald Trump. Well, this year, the leading Republican running for governor is the closest thing to a Trump clone that I've ever seen in your state. No, I really mean it. And he's leading the other team. He's the clone of Donald Trump. Can you imagine him being governor of this state? You can't let that happen.
So we've got rising crime, rising homelessness, an outrageous rise in the cost of living, declining public school standards. We now have 5 seasons here in California. The 5th one is the fire season. And that's because of the poor management of our forests. Gavin Newsom wants to blame it on climate change. Climate change, from what I can tell, has very little to do with it.
Well, Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham has been monitoring events, and he joins me now from Washington. Great to see you, Eric. So the campaign to unelect Gavin Newsom, and of course the results could have implications for the political trajectory of California. Tell us more about what's led to this campaign.
Well, Charles, it's not just California. What we're seeing here is a test run by Republicans for how they believe if they're successful, they can attack and go after Democrats in other blue states. Remember, California is like the prize. It's the biggest state in the nation, and also the most progressive state, with Democrats numbering Republicans 2-1. In addition to that, we have seen California actually become increasingly more blue over the years. In fact, areas such as Orange County, which was largely seen as a Republican stronghold, have become more and more blue. And so Democrats are now fighting to try to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in power, while we're seeing a rise and a push by Republicans. And not just a push, because if you go back just a few months, Charles, many thought that Larry Elder and Republicans could actually do this and be successful in recalling the governor. But of course, what we are seeing now are some of the extremist views of Larry Elder beginning to play. And now it appears as though he is becoming his own worst enemy. The reason why the recall actually gained such traction that it did largely was because of a very spirited and a very vocal Republican Party in the state. Now what we're seeing is Democrats have galvanized. They recognize that this could be a potential problem. And many poll watchers are suggesting that Gavin Newsom will remain in office and will do so very easily, which is why now we're beginning to see people like former President Donald Trump and Larry Elder suggest that fraud and other nefarious issues are at play in this recall.
Well, you mentioned the polls there, Eric. What are the latest polls actually showing about this race? Because, I mean, we heard that they were narrowing.
Yeah, that's right. They were narrowing. If you go back probably 6 to 8 weeks, the polls were actually narrowing, and they were showing a very tight race. And there was a concern that Democrats simply were not engaged because, again, we're talking about a state that's so largely Democratic. There was this thinking that they probably did not have to focus in as much. But as it appears, though Larry Elder was beginning to gain steam in the polling, we saw Democrats really begin to push. And that's why over the last few days, you have seen some of the biggest Democrats in the party begin to not only engage, but also to descend on California. Just recently, President Biden was there. Former President Barack Obama also sent out a message to voters in California, as well as a video that he orchestrated. And of course, the Vice President Kamala Harris has been there, Senator Elizabeth Warren. So all the big guns have come out to try to stave off this challenge. But again, what we're seeing here is now a doubling down of this big lie. And of course, that is now seen as perhaps the largest tool in the Republican toolkit that Republicans are going to use, not only in this race, should Republicans fail, but also they will use as a tool going forward, particularly in 2022.
And briefly, Eric, tell us about Larry Elder. I mean, the right-wing radio host who's emerged as the front runner to replace Gavin Newsom. I mean, some have suggested, as you pointed out earlier, that he's done the governor a favor by making the choice between California values and a mini Trump. What's your assessment of that?
Yeah, in fact, Charles, what we're seeing here is this has become more, this started out as a referendum on the Governor Gavin Newsom, which is actually where, if you're an opponent, that's where you want this race to be. But now, over the last few weeks, it has become a referendum on Larry Elder. And we have seen so many of his extremist views come into light. And now what you're seeing throughout the state of California, while there are some who may not be enamored with Governor Newsom, they certainly believe that he simply is not as scary as Larry Elder. As you mentioned, a radio show talk host, someone with extremist views on women, someone who said that he would have voted against the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Just someone who many in California simply cannot stomach.
But I mean, if by some freak of circumstance Larry Elder were to succeed, I mean, there could be major implications, as you said, not just for California, but nationally, couldn't there? Because I mean, if, for instance, 88-year-old California Senator Dianne Feinstein were for any reason unable to complete her term, I mean, it would be the new Republican governor who would choose her successor. And that would end the Democrats' exceedingly narrow control of the Senate, wouldn't it?
That's a very excellent point. You're absolutely right. And also, too, Charles, just on that point, we have actually heard that former Senator Barbara Boxer from California is also now trying to gently push Senator Feinstein into retirement. So you're absolutely right. That is a concern that Democrats in that state have. But right now, it appears as though they believe that they have this in the bag again, which is why you're now seeing so many Republicans call this a rigged election. And of course, that is going to play out in very stark terms this coming Saturday when there's a rally that will be held for those insurrectionists that took place in that violent event on January 6th. And that's going to take place at the Capitol this Saturday. So after this election on tonight, expect there to be an even more spirited conversation and debate over this this coming Saturday at the National Capitol here in Washington, D.C.
And we've got about a minute or less left, Eric. Beyond Gavin Newsom and Larry Elder, I understand there are quite a few wacky contenders for Mr. Newsom's job, aren't there?
That's just certainly true. In fact, we know Caitlyn Jenner, the former Bruce Jenner, who became transgender, he is also one of those candidates. Charles, we're talking more than 40 candidates that are now running to succeed Governor Newsom. Jenner is actually polling at less than 1%. And so clearly, a lot of these candidates get into this race. And of course, this is what many call the wacky season of politics in California.
And on that note, Eric, thank you ever so much. Eric Ham, our US correspondent, talking to me there from Washington.